Hello everybody and welcome to my video on, well, there's lots of different names for this, I guess, because there's really no names for it. This is the Aliexpress generic reusable camera, or as I'm going to call it, the Hayamou reusable, because I bought it from the Hayamou store on Aliexpress. So it is the completely generic Corex 35mm point and shoot. It is the Corex camera stripped of any sort of recognizable branding and logo. So that's what it is. By 35mm point and shoot, what I mean is it can take any 35mm film, though in the tips section I'll give you some pointers about how to make the most out of this camera. It has no light meter. It has a leaf or guillotine type shutter with a fixed shutter speed of approximately 1/100th of a second. It has a flash on it, and the flash will sync at the shutter speed. Unlike most of the cameras in this class, when you turn the flash on, you don't get a smaller aperture, so it just has a single fixed aperture of f8. And aside from this difference, it's functionally the same as all of the other reusable cameras coming out of Corex, which include the Vibe, Agfa Photo, Kodak F9, Ilford Sprite 2. All of those have effectively the exact same interior, slightly different front plates that make them look like different cameras. So this Aliexpress reusable camera is designed to be used by people who enjoy toy or fun cameras, who are just learning and want something simple and lightweight to carry around. It's almost completely plastic. I found versions of this camera with similar internal components and structures dating back to as early as the early 1980s, so there's nothing revolutionary whatsoever about this camera. But it is one thing that's very nice is that it's very light, comes with a nice little wrist strap, and so it is very easy to carry around. This was made by the Corex Corporation in China. I couldn't tell you exactly when it went into production, this specific design, but sometime in the last couple of years. And it appears to still be in production because I could buy this one new a few weeks ago. Now, if you have your reusable camera, as we do, we're going to go over some of the features and functions on it, starting, of course, with the top. Here we have the film rewind knob and lever, and this is what you will use to rewind the film when you're done. This is your flash indicator light that will tell you when the flash is ready to be used. So if we turn the flash on right now, well, shutter's not armed. Yeah, it's got a battery in it. Anyway, that'll light up red when the flash is ready to be used. Frame count window to tell you how many frames you've used. Shutter release button. On the camera's front, we have no maker or logo information, but we do have the lens, which is a focus-free 28mm f8, viewfinder window, flash, and flash power button. On the camera's back, we have the film door right here, which is what will open in just a few minutes to take a look inside. Viewfinder window and film advance dial right here. On the camera's bottom, we have the battery chamber, which is what's going to hold the AA battery that powers the flash, and the film rewind button. Now on the side here, we have a film back release switch, which we just push down to open up the camera and get inside of it. Film cassette chamber. This is your shutter area where the image is captured. This little gear right here catches the sprocket holes in the 35mm film so that as it's pulled through the camera, this arms the shutter so that the shutter can be fired. And your film take-up spool here. And then here we have film pressure ridges that help keep a proper bend on the film so that it can focus light properly. You might notice that this is a bowed or an arched film area, and that allows for the film to be distorted to correct for some optical imperfections in the in the lens's element, but also it helps with a little bit of illumination correction because the light on the edges will reach the film slightly brighter than it would if the film were flat. Relative, that is, to what's in the center of the frame. Now, having seen this, the first thing we're going to do with this camera is change the battery. So to change the battery, you simply lift open the battery chamber. We're going to grab the old dead battery out of here. There we go. Now, there's no indicator on the battery door on this one, which there usually is on this model of camera, as to which way the terminals go. So we're going to look inside. There's also no indicator inside as to which terminal, but the negative terminal does touch the spring with standard battery loaders, so negative terminal flat, positive has a little bump. We're just going to load this in. Negative terminal to the spring, drop it in, close it. We've put the battery into the camera. So next thing we're going to do is load film. Loading film is really easy. We're just going to open up the back of the camera, pop the film, ow, felt that. Pop the film rewind post up, grab our roll of 35mm film and drop it in. Put the film rewind post back down. That rewind post is very tight. There we go. Okay. We're going to grab our leader, and there are some little hook dudes down here on the bottom of the take-up spool. So I'm just going to hold my finger there, let the first loop of the leader catch, and we're going to advance this until it's gone around at least 1 to 1.5 times, which it has now, so I'm comfortable that that's going to hold. Close the back of the camera. Advance. Now this will stop advancing after we reach a certain amount of distance, so we'll take a photo. Advance, and then when we get to 1, that'll work. When we get to the 1 marker, that lets us know we've advanced far enough to get to fresh film and that we're ready to start taking photos. Okay. You know that the film is moving through this camera, by the way, if the shutter arms. The shutter's arming mechanism is linked to the film moving through the camera. So if the shutter doesn't arm, the film isn't moving. So, just going to demystify that right now. So, when you take a picture, you just push the shutter button and advance the film, and you can see here that the film rewind knob is also spinning, which is another indicator that your film is moving through the camera. One thing about film is that it is one and done. It can record an image a single time in a controlled manner by having a proper shutter speed and exposure, or it can record all of the photons that reach it in an uncontrolled manner like this. So if you're using film for the first time, don't open up the back of the camera while the film is outside of the cassette like this, because all of the film outside the cassette will be erased by the photons reaching it, and all of the photos that have been taken or could be taken will be ruined. You cannot see images on the film until they're developed. So, but I want you to see what's happening inside here when you take a picture. So just activate the shutter. I'm going to hold my finger here to simulate the back being closed. And as you advance the film, it pulls it through the back of the camera so that the film that was in the shutter area moves past it and is wrapped up over here. And as the film moves, these sprocket holes engage the sprocket and rearm the shutter. And when the film has finished moving so that fresh film is in the shutter area, the shutter's also been armed. And then you just replicate this 27 times for this roll of film. Now, when you are done, keep your film back closed, but when you're done, you're going to push the film rewind button on the bottom, and then you can start to rewind the film. And I'm going to hold my finger here to simulate the door being closed and holding it in the correct place. And you just rewind it the entire way. Okay, I'm having some problems with this film. I'm not going to rewind it the whole way. Anyway, once you've rewound it the whole way, at that point you can now open up your camera, lift up your film rewind knob in post, and you can then take out this cassette, grab your next cassette and drop it in and continue shooting. Or if you're done shooting for the day, make sure you trigger your shutter and close up your camera, and there you go. That's how you've loaded and unloaded film. To use the flash, it's pretty simple. If we have the battery in there, all we have to do is turn it on. You'll likely hear a very faint capacitor whine, and as you do, this light will light up. Now, the first time you ever use the flash, this is going to take a little time to light up for the capacitor to get charged for the first time. Then, oops, would help if I actually armed the shutter, I suppose. There we go. Then when you have the power on, and the light is lit up and you go to trigger the flash will fire. When you don't want to use the flash, simply turn that to off. The battery only powers the flash, does not do anything mechanical for the camera. So if you don't have a battery, or if the flash dies, or if the battery explodes, it's not an issue. Just take the battery out and you can still use the camera to take photos because it's completely mechanical aside from the battery for the flash. Okay, we've seen how to do that stuff. Next thing we want to do is talk about how to take a photo with this camera. It is complex and confusing. No, it's not. I'm just kidding. These cameras are designed for simplicity. To take a photo, what you're going to do is you're going to have film loaded in the camera. It's going to be ready on frame 1 or further, and then you're going to look through the viewfinder here. With your eye to the viewfinder, you're going to hold the camera up to your scene, and then when you've got an image or a scene in the viewfinder that looks like the image you want to take a photo of, you just hit the shutter release button and take your photo. When you're done, you just advance the film until this stops advancing and the shutter's rearmed, and repeat the process over and over again until you run out of film, and then you hold down the film rewind button while you rewind it back into the cassette. That's it. That is taking a photo. Super simple. But what about double exposures? You can't. You cannot take double exposures with this camera, unfortunately, because it's designed not to let you do that. Because the film has to move through the camera in order for it to arm the shutter, there's no way to take a double exposure. So I've got some tips for you on how to get the most out of your Aliexpress no name brand reusable camera. The first one is to use 400 ISO C41 color negative film. This is those films like the Ultramaxes and the Superiors are very forgiving. So you can throw too much light at them and they'll be fine. You can throw a little bit less light at them than they need and they'll still be fine. So the 400 ISO films will generally work inside, especially with a flash, or outside for sure, especially in full sun or even with some shade. If you're inside, you can also use an 800 ISO film. If you're using black and white, you could push a 400 to 800 ISO or 16 when you develop it, 1600, and that would work as well. Outside in full sun, you can get away with a film as slow as 200 ISO with these cameras. You know, f8 and 1/100th of a second, in theory, in full sun, should allow you to use a 50 ISO film. However, I found that even when I use 100 ISO films in these cameras, they tend to come out from outdoor shooting somewhat underexposed. And I don't know why that is. It shouldn't be that way. Anyhow, 400 ISO film, good bet. Next up is that these are really lightweight. They're easy to carry around. And this one, being unbadged, was very cheap. It was literally less than half the cost of the cheapest of the badged cameras of this design that I bought, which was the Vibe, I think it was. So at $17, very affordable option. So you can take it with you wherever you want. Just throw it in your back pocket, have it around your wrist, whatever. It's perfect for carrying. Just when you carry it, be mindful not to slam it around because these locks on the doors aren't perfect and you don't want to have the door pop open because if it does, any film that's outside of the cassette probably going to be ruined. And the last thing is just enjoy these cameras. They're primarily plastic. They're not meant to last forever, and quite frankly, they won't. But it is a lot of fun to shoot with one of these, and you know what? Even though they're all plastic, they can still take some captivating images. So have fun. So one quick note for Corex, if you're watching this, as I say with all of these, adding a bulb shutter speed and a multiple exposure switch for the next generation of these cameras would make them significantly more usable and a lot more fun. They're fun now, but adding some very basic usability like that would really expand creative use with them. Some things not to do with this camera. Don't store it with the shutter armed. Just hit the shutter when you're done for the day. Even if you have a roll of film in there, it's better to waste a frame of film than to have the shutter get affected by springs that have been left with tension on them. Because basically when you put tension on springs, if they sit like that for long enough, they'll develop a memory. The next thing is don't let it get wet. It's not weather sealed. And while there's not a whole lot in here that could rust, if you got water in your film, it could mess up your film. And that's really it. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos.